Hello and welcome to CineMaine, where we look at films that are connected to Maine, whether they be set in Maine, filmed in Maine, or have any other loose connections to the state of Maine. With SpongeBob's fourth theatrical film releasing, Search for Squarepants, I figured this would be the perfect time to look at our favorite crustacean's first theatrical outing, simply titled The SpongeBob Squarepants Movie. Spun off from the Nickelodeon show of the same name and directed by the show's creator, Stephen Hillenburg. I'm assuming that if you're in your 30s or 20s or younger, you've probably already seen this film at least once. But for those who haven't, the basic premise is as follows. The protagonist embarrasses himself at a public event when he thinks he's been accepted for winning something that he didn't. Oh, wait, sorry. That was Zoolander. My bad. Here's the SpongeBob Squarepants movie. The protagonist, SpongeBob Squarepants, embarrasses himself at a public event when he thinks he's been accepted for winning something that he didn't. In this case, not becoming the new manager of where he works.
I feel that Sponge's god dang pain, I tell you what.
His boss, Mr. Krabs, thinks SpongeBob is just a kid and doesn't have the responsibility that such a position requires. This ultimately bumps SpongeBob out as much as Derek's Zoolander not getting Model of the Year. Meanwhile, Krabs' business rival and owner of the Chum Bucket, Plankton, who's been trying to steal me secret formula for years, conjures up and successfully executes a plan to steal King Neptune's crown, framing Krabs for the crime in the process, ultimately leading Krabs to be frozen by the king himself. With Krabs out of the picture, Plankton finally steals the secret formula, leading to booming business for the Chum Bucket. To top it all off, he also uses Chum Bucket helmets to control the minds of his customers so that he can finally take over the world. SpongeBob, eager to prove that he's not just a kid, goes on a quest with his starfish best friend Patrick, along with the occasional aid of the king's daughter Princess Mindy, to retrieve Neptune's crown from Shell City, saving both Mr. Krabs and Bikini Bottom in the process. Okay, so I know what you guys are probably thinking right now.
There's no god dang way that SpongeBob connects to Maine, you giblet head. He lives in Bikini Bottom, a fictional underwater town in the Pacific, which was already named after the coral reef Bikini Atoll.
And yes, all of that's true. And I've said in the past that animated films usually aren't made in Maine, even though this movie does contain a live-action segment involving David Hasselhoff getting SpongeBob and Patrick back home in time to save Bikini Bottom. But believe it or not, this film's connection to Maine is through the film's director, as well as the show's creator, Stephen Hillenburg, who, despite primarily growing up in California, along with living there for most of his life, both during his time working on SpongeBob and during his time as a marine biology teacher at the Orange County Marine Institute, there actually was a brief period in Hillenburg's life where he lived in Maine. And guess what he did for a living during his time in Maine?
Fry cook.
Bingo! As someone who, like many people my age, has been a huge fan of SpongeBob since childhood, finding this out as an adult has kinda made me react like this. Knowing that Stephen Hillenburg had a Maine connection was really exciting to me, as my top 3 favorite Nickelodeon shows of all time are Invader Zim, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and this, with the latter of these 3 having the biggest impact on pop culture that any Nickelodeon show has ever had and even still has more than 25 years after debuting. I naturally became curious to see if anything else in the show had a Maine connection. Luckily, SpongeBob's voice actor, Tom Kenny, recently appeared at a con that was held in Bangor, so I decided to drive over and inquire about this. I even got the DVD copy of this movie that I've had for over 20 years signed as well. Needless to say, he was incredibly nice and a lot of fun to be around, but I digress. He explained that Hillenburg's profession during his time in Maine was the inspiration for SpongeBob's job, but also that the restaurant that he worked at also served as the inspiration for the Krusty Krab. Unfortunately, Kenny couldn't quite remember the exact name of the restaurant, but said that he was sure the info was out there somewhere, even going so far as to quote the X-Files' infamous slogan when telling me about this. I have to admit that was pretty funny. I did some digging, Fox Mulder style, the following morning, and according to my findings, the restaurant Hillenburg worked at was actually the Isleford Dock Restaurant and Gallery, located in the town of, well, Isleford.
No, duh.
I bizarrely had never heard of Isleford before in my life. Turns out it's a small village located in Cranberry Isles just off the coast of Hancock County. So Tom Kenny, if you're watching this, let it be known that the truth has been found. Come to think of it, the Krusty Krab itself is basically a lobster trap. And let's face it, Maine is definitely known for its lobsters. Another connection that Tom pointed out to me during my conversation with him was that SpongeBob's boss and Krusty Krab owner, Eugene Krabs, was based off of Hillenburg's boss at the restaurant he worked at, whom Kenny described as being a real cheapskate. No surprise there.
For a Krabby Patty? With cheese, Mr. Squidward.
While I'm sure these connections to Maine might seem rather loose compared to other movies I've reviewed in the past, the connections themselves are so defining towards SpongeBob's identity as a whole that it would have felt like such a missed opportunity if I didn't talk about SpongeBob on this channel. I still remember the hype surrounding this movie when it came out. From the teaser I saw when I went to go see Return of the King, along with subsequent advertising, all the way down to seeing the film in theaters the day it came out with my dad and older sister. Definitely a fun childhood memory of mine, to say the least. At that age, the movie more than lived up to the hype for me, and upon revisiting this film as an adult, I think there might be a lot more to this movie than it gets credit for. For starters, the animation in this film is gorgeous to look at. That's probably no surprise to fans of the show, since the animation there was great for different yet similar reasons when compared to this movie. Obviously, because this is a theatrical movie and not a TV show, the animators were given a bigger budget and were able to spend more time adding extra fluidity and detail when compared to the show. But despite the budget increase, the art style of the movie and the show are very synonymous with each other. Even down to how many shots in this movie, like in episodes of the show, have some of the funniest freeze frames you'll ever see. Especially the ones that are hilariously over-detailed. There were many moments where I kept pausing the movie just to admire what I was looking at. These animators are true artists. But there's more than one animation style here too. Combining traditional 2D with some CGI, along with some claymation shots during the climax, and of course blending 2D animation with live action during the Shell City sections of the movie. Some of the funniest bits of this movie are during this section, like when SpongeBob and Patrick finally do get to Shell City after being taken there by this scuba diver, revealing that Shell City's basically a coastal gift shop, and that the scuba diver just collects things from the ocean to turn into crafty items to sell. That sounds innocent enough, but the movie plays it up like he's this big monster that SpongeBob and Patrick have to overcome. Hearing this guy maniacally laugh while basically just doing arts and crafts is honestly hilarious. As is when other items in the store end up coming back to life through the sprinkler system being activated and they get revenge on him. How can you not die laughing at this? This is exactly the kind of inane humor that the show perfected. Even down to a mariachi band playing music in the background while this guy's being defeated. Speaking of music, the music in this film is excellent. We're all familiar with the Goofy Goober song from this movie, but there's actually a lot more to the music in this film besides that. It was pretty cool hearing Motorhead during that scene where SpongeBob and Patrick go to the biker bar very briefly, and the climax utilizes music from some other 80s metal bands too. If you pay close enough attention when SpongeBob gives a surprisingly heartfelt speech detailing what he went through to get Neptune's crown back to Bikini Bottom, you can hear an instrumental version of the synth intro from Whitesnake's Here I Go Again, which does a perfect job heightening the emotion in this scene right before leading into one of my all-time favorite climaxes to any movie, where SpongeBob just straight up plays a Weird Al style spoof of Twisted Sister's I Wanna Rock, which is titled Goofy Goober Rock. Using the power of rock and roll to destroy the bucket helmets and free Bikini Bottom citizens from Plankton's control in the process. This movie introduced me to Twisted Sister before Guitar Hero or Rock Band ever could, and to say that I became an instant fan would be an understatement. I also discovered recently that this spoof also briefly sampled David Lee Roth's cover of Just a Gigolo. This might sound a bit cruel of me, but I'm convinced that if you get through this scene and don't feel the music shooting through you, you may have no soul. Thank you. Going back to the film's comedy though, it's worth noting that the villains in this film are hilarious. Not only does Plankton get some of the funniest lines and moments in this film, but there's also a secondary villain in this film in the form of a bounty hunter voiced by Alec Baldwin. Wait a minute. Alec Baldwin in a Nickelodeon production? Why does that sound familiar? Anyway, think of this guy as the Nickelodeon equivalent of Jack Reacher. His humor is rather deadpan, and he is one tough brawler you do not want to mess with. I especially got Reacher vibes from him during a scene where these bikers accuse him of blowing bubbles. He doesn't even say a word to these guys. He just punches one of them hard enough to fly in the air and then rides away. Very blunt and very no nonsense. Though the way he's taken out at the end of the movie is pretty funny.
You are worthless, Eric Barrett!
Weird to think that Paramount put out 2 animated films during the American Idiot era, and they both axe off Alec Baldwin. It was also fun noticing the surprising amount of adult humor that was snuck into this film, which again, makes sense because that happened in the show too. After SpongeBob's spirits are crushed after not getting the manager job that he wanted, he goes to the Goofy Goober ice cream parlor later that night where his best friend Patrick finds him. I love how these two are basically at the bar and go on a bit of a bender and even wake up hungover the next morning. SpongeBob's facial expressions here are icing on the cake. I also found parallels between this film and some other movies too. I already made the Zoolander comparison earlier, and bizarrely enough, I noticed that many of the characters in this film arguably have their own counterparts in that movie too. I think we can all agree that the car from Good Burger walked so that the car from this movie could run, or drive. And I was also reminded of a certain Brendan Fraser classic when customers put the chum bucket helmets on. I also noticed some similarities to another animated film spun off from a TV show that was in theaters 8 years earlier, which also followed 2 goofballs who end up going on a journey that ultimately leads both sets of characters to being viewed as heroes at the end. And each film involves a female character created just for the film. In SpongeBob's case, the king's daughter, Mindy, who is voiced by the lovely Scarlett Johansson no less, promises to make men out of SpongeBob and Patrick. I mean, she gives them mustaches that turn out to be fake.
Well, that was a ripoff.
In an effort to boost their confidence when they start to have doubts. This excites them so much that it takes an eternity for her to get their attention again. Kinda like when Demi Moore's character in Beavis and Butthead's film learned that the boys thought that they were being paid to do something other than kill her. It took forever for her to get their attention again also. What makes this even stranger is that this is probably the only film in cinematic history to have a lot in common with both Beavis and Butthead and Homer's Odyssey. Not the 3rd episode of The Simpsons. There, the one that Christopher Nolan's adapting. I know how crazy that sounds at first, but it really is a retelling of that story, and I'm not the only one who's come to that conclusion either. SpongeBob and Patrick trying to get to Shell City and back is like Odysseus trying to make it back to Ithaca. They both encounter a Cyclops. They go through the underworld for a bit, which is kind of like if Rock Bottom had a neon glow-up. They even try to use a bag of winds to get them home, only for that to backfire. Though I don't think this film has its own equivalent to the sirens from that story, unless maybe there's that elderly lady that tried handing out ice cream to them, only to turn out to be the tongue of some mythical sea creature. I guess that's close enough. I mean, she did lure them in. But yeah, not only is it really funny that this film has parallels to both Beavis and Butthead and classic literature, but what makes this even more interesting is that, like a lot of classical literature, there's more than one way that the themes and message of this film can be interpreted. For starters, I'm kinda shocked that this film hasn't become reevaluated as being a Pride Month movie. This is not only due to a couple of funny lines, like this one that Plankton has,
Daddy, yes!
or the way that SpongeBob describes his brief encounter with David Hasselhoff,
And I rode the Hasselhoff!
as well as this brief section at a biker bar where the patrons pride themselves on how manly they are, along with hair metal songs being used in the climax, a genre that definitely has its own overtones. But to top it all off, the basic message of the movie is to not let negative things that other people might say about you stop you from being comfortable in your own skin and be who you are. Something I'm sure a lot of LGBT people have had to come to terms with in their own lives. At this point, I'm surprised the biker bar wasn't playing the same music that the steel mill from The Simpsons played. But this is not the only way that this film's message can be interpreted either. At its core, the movie is essentially about the transition from adolescence to adulthood. As I mentioned earlier, the reason Mr. Krabs doesn't make SpongeBob the new Krusty Krab manager is because he thinks SpongeBob acts too much like a kid. A good chunk of the side characters in this film also treat him and Patrick rather similarly. And at one point on their journey to Shell City, SpongeBob even contemplates going back home and breaks down because he doesn't think he can make it and that everyone else was right given his and Patrick's tastes. This is something that I'm confident many millennials and Gen Zers can identify with on a personal level. I know I do. A lot of my own go-to shows are animated shows I grew up with, and my taste in music heavily revolves around a lot of punk and alt-rock bands I discovered growing up. And there are plenty of people in my own age group that I know who are just as in touch with their own nostalgia. But it goes even beyond that. There's also the fact that a lot of these same people have relatives in older generations who don't take them seriously, the same way that the adults in this movie don't take SpongeBob and Patrick seriously. Along with how the cost of living seems to keep rising each passing year, causing many people my age to become increasingly more burned out, and riddled with the same kind of doubt that SpongeBob starts to have halfway through their journey. These parallels could easily make the film hit too close to home, but these aspects are handled in a manner that's bizarrely yet powerfully uplifting. Not only do SpongeBob and Patrick realize it's okay to embrace their inner child, not only do they save Bikini Bottom at the end, but they almost die trying to do so. In a scene that makes me feel the same way Hank Hill felt when he went to go see that Ethan Hawke movie, but in the best way. I'm sure some parents at the time might have complained that this scene was too dark for something like SpongeBob, but if I can be totally honest, if this scene didn't go as hard as it did, along with other scenes of SpongeBob and Patrick trying to succeed, the film's message wouldn't resonate nearly as much as it does. But because the movie does go this hard in these places, it makes the film's message and final outcome all the more triumphant at the end. Man, who would have thought that SpongeBob Squarepants could have so much depth?
I know, right?
I guess I shouldn't be surprised, considering that this film was intended by Steven Hillenburg to serve as the series finale. I mean, think about it. We finally see Plankton steal the Krabby Patty secret formula and take over Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob and Patrick not only save the day at the end, but King Neptune gives SpongeBob the credit he deserves, and an Unfrozen Krabs finally gives SpongeBob the job he wanted all along, leading into the end credits, which showcase images of SpongeBob as the manager set to the most iconic usage of Ocean Man by Ween, a song that will always remind me of this movie every time I hear it. I have to admit, after seeing this film on the big screen back then, I kinda wondered if we would even get new episodes anymore. This film just seemed like too good of a note not to go out on. But of course, this show was and still is to Nickelodeon and Paramount what Looney Tunes have been to Warner Brothers and what The Simpsons is to 20th Century Fox. So Nickelodeon renewed the show, and it's still on the air with new episodes even to this very day. I was fine with this at the time, as second grade me wasn't ready for the show to be over yet, but at the same time, I will admit, it saddens me that Steven Hillenburg will never get to see the final episode of the show itself. So as the Nostalgia Critic and Phantom Strider have also pointed out, knowing this does make the movie all the more special to fans of the show. So I think we can all just agree that this is where the story officially ends. Hopefully nothing in subsequent episodes or movies retcons this. Now, as far as things about this movie that I don't like are concerned, God, is there anything, actually? Oh, I guess there is one thing. Sandy Cheeks is barely even in this. She was a lot of fun in the show, but in this movie she gets like one line, I think, and that's it. It is a pretty funny line, though. It breaks the fourth wall in a manner similar to what Homer did at the beginning of the Simpsons movie.
We paid $9 for this?
I paid 10.
What's that for? That's my only line!
Overall, this movie is every bit as good as I remember, if not even better. It's the kind of movie that's fun when you're a kid, but when you revisit it as an adult, it's still fun, but you're able to appreciate certain aspects of it that may have gone over your head as a child, creating a whole new viewing experience, which in my mind is the best kind of experience one can have with a film from their childhood. I guess if you're someone who hates SpongeBob, like has always found the show annoying and whenever someone's made you watch it, it's just gotten on your nerves, this movie more than likely won't win you over. But I'm sure you probably already knew that. If you're someone who's gone their whole lives never having ever seen SpongeBob at least once, First of all, how? Second of all, thank you so much for letting me spoil a bunch of this movie for you. Third, I guess you could still watch this film on its own and have a good time with it if it seems up your alley, but I personally recommend checking out the first 3 seasons of the show first. I feel like that might give you more context, and especially a deeper appreciation for these characters that people unfamiliar with the show may not have going into the film itself. And of course, if you're someone who does love SpongeBob and either somehow haven't seen this film yet, or if you did see this film as a kid and remember it quite fondly, it is safe to say it is more than worth the rewatch. Much like the SpongeBob character himself, it may seem like nothing more than silly, goofy fun on the surface, but if you dive deeper, you might find there's so much more to this lovable crustacean critter that has brought out the goofy goober in all of us. Thank you guys a bunch for checking this video out. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for more vids, and even some shorts every now and then. And also be sure to check out CineMaine's website, and be on the lookout for future CineMaine content.